Thank you very much. My apologies, we seem to have gone a little bit over time, but I indicated that we would take approximately 10 minutes each and then questions thereafter. Once again, it's great to be back in Colombia. I've been coming here now for approximately about 8 to 10 years. Unfortunately, I still do not speak Spanish, but I'll attempt to actually speak English as a South African, which is usually a very different accent for many people to actually follow. But hopefully we'll be able to communicate. The focus of my discussion is really looking at how is the International Office transforming itself into adding more value to the actual institution. The emphasis up until now has been very much on things like student mobility and more the issues relating to curriculum transformation, etc. However, what we've done at Nelson Mandela University in the past 5 years is look how can we actually transform the actual international office into a research hub. Meaning, how do we actually take the research agenda into internationalization, into the international office? So my focus is going to be how we've actually done that and what are some of the lessons that we've actually learned in that particular context. Why? I think that if you look at the creation of knowledge around internationalization in the world, it has been to a large extent dominated by the North, or let's call it more powerful economies. It is therefore, for a country like South Africa and Colombia, very important to ask ourselves to what extent is our voice actually being heard in terms of research output into internationalization of higher education. So the emphasis of my presentation would be how are we collectively going to become more research active in order to actually ensure that the voice of countries that are often marginalized in the debate around internationalization of higher education is actually heard. Now, if we look at some of the issues, I'll be looking at the actual, some of the conceptual issues, how we reconceptualizing higher education internationalization. And more specifically, I'll be looking at some of the structures which we've actually created, which are quite innovative, and that will be my last point that I'll actually be referring to. Now, I think that we probably need to recognize, as in South Africa, it's also a Colombian challenge. We're inclined to actually recognize that we self-sanction ourselves and that we don't always adapt and adopt new challenges, new ways of actually looking at things. And partly that's connected to, both in South Africa and Colombia, our history. And I think that history of a reputation of being a country that is characterized by violence or conflict is probably the first issue we need to actually look at in internationalization of higher education. To actually change that image, that reputational damage that has been done regarding our countries in order to actually assert ourselves more in research field as such. It is therefore very important that when we actually look at the type of research that is being done regarding internationalization, we address the issue of reputation. And how can we actually transform our countries into a country of choice regarding higher education internationalization? Now, the emphasis to a large extent of the conference has been that of best practice. However, I wish to actually expand upon that, and my discussion would be rather to look at how can we look at collaborative practices. Because if a best practice is actually to be practiced and recognized as a best practice, it cannot operate on its own. Anybody in this room recognizes that no matter how well your international office is actually structured, it cannot survive if that internationalization philosophy is not permeated throughout the organization. Therefore, I want us more to look not only in terms of what I'm discussing as a best practice, but look at it as part of a collaborative practices throughout the actual institution regarding internationalization of higher education. Now, what has actually happened and why is this new push looking at the international office globally? In our particular case is a whole new move from creating a bureaucracy or bureaucrats or professionals in internationalization to recognizing that there is, yes, a part of you which is an international specialist, but there is also another part of you which is an academic. And how does one bring these two roles together to actually counter the bureaucracy that is actually occurring within the actual university? Which means that there's often a contradiction in the role which you have to play, both that of an administrator as well as having to interact on an equal level. And I want to stress that. It is time that international officers began to see themselves as equal to the academic project within which you actually work. One is inclined to almost see yourself as an administrator, a coordinator, a liaison officer, etc., rather than recognizing your academic stature within the actual organization. Which means that the organization of your international office is basically now characterized by three primary points. One, to actually facilitate the research within the actual institution. But two is the one that I want to emphasize, that you become a center of research in itself. So if you actually look at some of you I know, and I've been working with Colombians in the internationalization offices. Some of you are single person, some two, some three, some four. Now this makes what I'm saying quite difficult, but it can nevertheless be done. Is how do you actually change your activity into actually becoming a center of research and not just a liaison with outside entities? And if we take that now further as to how international offices are actually developing, we will see much less emphasis just on migration and curriculum issues, but issues such as research and project management, which is of an international collaborative nature, will become much more the focus of our attention. Now, if we actually look at what we're actually doing as a university, and I want to take you through some of these points of how do we actually translate what has become a purely administrative role into that of becoming an academic research role, is by the following. We've become much more active within the office regarding postgraduate recruitment. Meaning that when we actually go out into recruiting, and people, in our particular case, people from the actual international office go to various countries to recruit directly. So my responsibility, for example, if we go to a place like Uganda or any other place within Africa or any other European country, would actually be to present how would you actually write a research proposal. So that the student that you're actually recruiting has a much more better knowledge of what is actually expected when they actually apply to the institution. Because if you look at our problem, is that we get a large number of applications, but with very poor proposals, which means that the student is rejected for postgraduate studies. So what we're trying to do is address that issue of assisting a student, and that means that I, as from the international office has to be aware of the different faculty requirements in terms of what a master's or PhD research proposal would actually look like, and be able to answer those particular questions at a recruiting session. Furthermore, what we've actually established within the actual office is what we call a research manager. A research manager who would be responsible then for actually researching issues. For example, if you look at the number of students that come into your countries and into your universities, if actually doing research on those students, what was their experience? How did they experience the culture, the academic environment? These are all research activities which need to be incorporated for your future planning within the actual office. Furthermore, we see that we've formed, which is the emphasis of my discussion, of what we call a unit for higher education internationalization in the developing world. The idea is that this unit is actually bringing together people like yourselves, which can affiliate to the actual unit, as well as people from the Northern Hemisphere in developing countries, in order to develop knowledge around internationalization of higher education, specifically research-based, that can actually establish a much better intellectual platform for internationalization of higher education. I'll also speak about how we publish various publications, which I'll come to, as well as what we do allow is that research associates, either yourselves or people from your academic institution, would be able to actually affiliate as a research associate to the unit to engage themselves in internationalization of higher education research. Now, why am I sort of putting emphasis on this as a what we see as an innovative way of looking at it? If you look at the number of institutions that provide degrees for internationalization of higher education, it is very limited. You will see that the majority of degrees focus on higher education with a small aspect of internationalization. So we need to actually address that. Secondly, we need to ask ourselves, is internationalization of higher education a discipline? Is it? If we actually look at international of higher education, we need to ask ourselves, is there a theoretical base? And when you start looking for that theoretical base, you find it's very absent. There's little bits here and there of particular studies that have actually attempted to develop a theory around internationalization of higher education. So although we have conferences, although we actually address the various issues, many of our publications are often case studies or related to particular operational aspects, but there's very little theoretical underpinning of what we're actually discussing out there that's being published. It is also required of international staff within the actual office, and just for your information, our office is actually called the Office of International Education, which also positions it within this particular sphere. The staff are also required to do research which is then published, which is then also presented at conferences. This will give you some idea of how we've actually incorporated research within the actual office. The office is approximately 20 people, and you can see the two highlighted aspects of where research is actually focused. Nevertheless, all the other people involved in the actual organization would be involved in doing research. I can share this with you and I can actually discuss it further to give you an idea of how we've actually positioned our office in terms of the various functional aspects of the office. So one can see then we've got the unit, we've got the research manager who's also in charge of internationalization at home, as well as we've got postgraduate assistants, which are involved in actually doing research within the office. So you can see Evan, what we've done is appoint students, senior students, as well as recruited students from elsewhere to actually work in the office as researchers around internationalization aspects. Furthermore, we also encourage students to register in topics related to internationalization of higher education, and people in the office would actually then supervise those candidates. So if you look at your postgraduate office, that would actually link between the internationalization office and the university faculty as well. As well as you can see that the staff are all encouraged to do postgraduate degrees, as well as involving themselves in the examination and moderation of postgraduate qualifications. So acting as an examiner or a moderator of a thesis or dissertation at master's and doctoral level. So all of these are seen as embedding the concept of research within the actual office. Now, further to that, you can see the office is also responsible for addressing various cultural issues, as well as probably the most important thing which we need to actually address is how to actually manage cross-cultural collaborative teams, particularly managing those in a way that is more productive, which requires probably our insight. I spoke about the publications. As an office, we put out various publications which emanate from a 2-year conference, as well as you'll see our engagement in Africa, where we've actually sort of emphasized recruiting postgraduate students in particular, and our footprint as a consequence of that has become quite extensive. I'll move on. This is also quite an interesting initiative, is that our short learning programs all require, particularly of myself, who would be the academic advisor within the actual office, of developing the curriculum for the actual short learning program. So to ensure that the academic standard of the program is maintained, each program that is actually short learning program that is developed is one identifies it with certain outcomes, and we then monitor the actual academic input, both in terms of theoretical as well as experiential learning within these. These are just three programs which we do present. There's many more. So actually doing the research for that curriculum is done with the office in conjunction with academics. This is another initiative which we've taken in trying to actually further the process of internationalization, of holding workshops where we bring international professionals together with actual faculty members within a workshop context in order to actually ensure the translation of academic and internationalization issues. So to look at how to actually bridge that gap. We're finding this is very successful in terms of actually making academics, because we've got a rapid turnover of senior academics, of continuing the academic project within the actual institution. I won't go into many. I'll share the constitution of the actual unit with you, and you'll be able to see whether it is feasible of creating such a unit within your actual universities. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Now we will have Carlos Montufar from the University of San Francisco of Quito to continue with this conference of best practices in this 9th version of the Latin American and Caribbean Conference for the Internationalization of Higher Education, LACHEC 2017. Hello, it's nice to see you. Thank you for receiving me in Medellin. I love the city. I love this dynamic of university, private and public company. I'm from Ecuador. How many of us are professors of the university? We're in the classroom. That's the passion, right? That's where we are. How many of us are university administrators? That's what we do not like doing, right? Directors of international programs. Is there any physics here? Well, I always have this situation. I'm a physicist. I studied physics in the Jurassic times in the 70s, and 3 physicists that studied with me, that studied in the United States, we came back to Ecuador, and in 1988 we decided to create a private university. This university was coming as an internationalization concept because the 3 of us had that DNA, that blood, where we knew that it was important for the new University of Ecuador in Latin America to go towards an internationalization process. We started just as 12 professors without students, and we are at the moment 8,500 students, 700 professors, most of them with PhDs, and we can have the pride of saying that we have the most international students in all Latin America. In this moment, we have 1,000 students, mainly in North America, and hundreds of students around the world. And we have research programs with the best university, research centers in the Galapagos, in the Amazons. We have internationalized because that's how we were born. And I want to tell you that in many occasions, we are worrying of topics from the university, and we forget the essence of education. That's what really allows us to internationalize. Sometimes we worry here in Ecuador worse due to accreditation, mobility, pertinence, the rigid curriculums, all of these topics that are imposed by the wise men of the state. They forbid us to make dynamic universities to be able to adapt to the internationalization. So I want to tell you what we believe in. I believe in this model where we have grown in this last 30 years, and it has allowed us to have success in the internationalization. And that's the basis of education. Education has many fashions nowadays. We change curriculum, we do many things to improve, but we forget about the essence of the education, which is the common denominator of all the universities of the world. If we speak of this common denominator with all the universities of the world, it will be much easier to make internationalization. So these programs of interchange with all the continents must be done. Have students from all the continents. Make research with all the continents. However, which is the essence? Usually, we tend to forget where the education is born, which are the components, the permanent components of education, those that do not change in time, those that are not looking at the fashion. The education has permanent components, and that was the essence with which we founded our institution to be able to have a program of internationalization and other activities of high quality. And I have two young people there. Well, not that young, but 2 people that do represent the concept of the liberal arts. Some other people call them humanities, but it's the liberal arts. Every discipline is a liberal art, and if the liberal arts are the base of an academical pensum of any institution, the internationalization becomes even easier because we're speaking the same language. We speak the same passion, that we do not want to internationalize just to transfer knowledge. We want to give enthusiasm. We want to give passion and good practices. moreover than just the transference of knowledge. The Latin American University has been dedicated exclusively, at least in Ecuador, to transfer knowledge, to instruct, to institutions that are dedicated only to the instruction. And that's easy. Instructing is easy. The difficult part is educating. Educating has components that are not measurable by the people that give these credits. So the intangible of the institution is the most important. That spirit, that essence is the most important to be able to attract and be able to have international programs. We have a tendency in Latin America to create to put in departments or in compartments each program, mechanical engineer, economy, and they do not interconnect themselves. That's the base of internationalization. There must be there must be a process of interning the university towards what is international. We trend to have challenges of faculties that do not speak between themselves. We need to have much more interaction inside the institutions so we can have other interactions with international institutions. And that is done through the liberal arts. Those knowledge areas that are common for everyone, and where we can mix students, a civil engineer, an architect, and an economist in the same class during the first years. That allows to develop and share and learn of differences. The liberal arts have basically two components. That is the base of any institution. This comes from the Greeks, the Romans, right? One part is communicating. The essence of education at any level is communication. The language, the chat, the Facebook, the email, the literature, lecture, everything is communication, language. We cannot internationalize ourselves if we do not know how to communicate correctly, even moreover with countries that have different languages. So communication is the essence of education. This comes from the liberal arts that is called a trivium. The other component is the process of observing. How I see, how I observe, to be able to make a process of education. And that comes from the quadrivium that makes part of the liberal arts. Da Vinci used to say that the important part of the education is knowing how to see, and the education generally learns how to see and observe. They tell people and young people in the schools and different places saying, look, this is what you're seeing. So one thing is to teach and another one is to learn. Usually education tends to teach. Many international models with which we are interested to have interchanges is where we have a model where they are teaching to learn, not to teach to teach. So it's pretty important to change the concept of teaching from a model of memory to a more dynamic model. So these are very important models. I had some screens and the screen was too bright, so that's why I haven't changed it. I saw somebody was using some sunglasses to be able to see the screen. So okay, so here we have the 7 liberal arts, right? They're composed of the triennium: dramatic, drama, rhetoric, and grammar. That's knowing how to communicate ourselves. That's common in everyone. The quadriennium: geometry, arithmetics, astronomy, and music, where we quantify. In the universe, the universe has to be quantified, observed, and then communicate. If all the universities have this as a base for all the students, the internationalization will become much more fluid. That has been our experience, especially because most of our programs of interchange are within North American universities. Let's say that 90%. So those universities that have this concept of the liberal arts flow very easily and will do practical things. We will have credits, subjects, interchange of professors and research. It will be easier because we all have the same language over education. So that's the base. In many occasions, I'm going to start concluding. The next slides are just too bright and I don't want to put you blind, to make you blind. So, to conclude, the important thing, and this is something very interesting from an Italian philosopher, Calabria, we are forgetting about the essence of education. We have to learn once again the utility of the use of the unuseful things. We tend to make universities where we only think that only the programs and the careers have to be useful. Of course they have to have skills and create a profession, but you realize, and our experience has been, that the usefulness of the unusefulness is what usually helps our graduates when they go into international programs, when they go to the labor and visit the rest of the world. So that was my idea, that was my concept. I wanted to thank you for being with me, and in a special manner I want to thank this commission that received me, the University of Antioquia, the Colegiatura, the National University, and a special thanks to Juan Luis from EAFID that took his time to make a very interesting tour to see how in Medellin we have this fluidity that we do not have an equator between university, state, and enterprise. Thank you very much. Now, we want to invite Jorge Enrique Patiño from the National Direction of Schools in Colombia to continue with this speech of good practices. Okay, good morning to all of you. Please receive a special salutation from the police of Colombia. And for me, it's an honor to come and expose a practice that has been selected in a topic that, due to many experience of our countries, made us be experts, and it's being experts in forming police officers. And this network of internationalization of police education that I'm going to present, has some pretty important components to work with you and tell you which was the dynamic that took all the police officers of Latin America to integrate in front of a very important topic, that is the formation of our police officers in terms of citizen security. So, telling you that the internationalization network has two main focuses for the education per se. The first one is a topic of cooperation in the educational procedures, be able to transfer that knowledge that all the institutions of higher education have, or at least the ones that form police officers in Latin America. And the other one was a topic of insurance of quality, because we started realizing that the quality has a paper, according to the experience of Colombia with the National Direction of Schools, that is the institution of higher education of the police of Colombia. We are a university institution with around 40 years of existence. We have a credit in high quality, and we have 65 academical programs, from which 30% of them are in high quality. And this made us, or mandated us, to start telling our experience to all the countries in Latin America to see how we were doing it and why it was important for them to start working and start to look certain standards that perhaps is quite difficult here in Colombia as an armed institution to adjust the standards to the standards of the high education. But we have done it, and we have done it successfully. We have our points of quality, and we participate in the systems of quality in education in the country, and we are promoting it in Latin America as a possibility of improvement in the quality of education. So we work 4 different lines. First one, and very importantly, is the topic of research and investigation. This topic of research and investigation over, of course, citizenship security that allows the police officers to tell their experiences. We're quite connected. We are online constantly. And in this moment, we're looking for a cooperation over what we research and the results that come as an output in topics of security, to be able to share it with all Latin America and know between all the members to know what we want, where we want to go to improve security. The second topic is in a topic of curricular internationalization, and the formation of our police officers can be a little bit, let's say, different according to the culture of the country. However, the curricular or the general formation of a police officer is the same in Argentina, Mexico, and Central America. It will always be the same situation in front of how we should form a police officer. This makes us look our study plans, try to see how we're doing it, and sell this practice to other countries so they appropriate it and they form their own police force. The next topic is also quite important, and it's the academical mobility, and it's being able to take out our professors, our students, and take them to other places of Latin America and the world at this moment, because in this moment we're started to work with Spain. The network has grown, people from Italy, to transfer this knowledge, and this mobility allows us to say that per year we're moving between 1,000, 1,200 instructors and students between all the police officers of Latin America. And the last topic, that is an institutional accreditation for international police officers, that was designed by RENET, where we designed specific standards that have been approved step by step with all the institution, where we board different topics but with a very exclusive focus with the topic of education of the police officers. With this great 4 lines, RENET is moving, and it's the institution that has allowed us to organize ourselves in certain topics, and initially we did it in the year 2015 after coming back and forth on certain topics in the cooperation with the institutions, with a lot of cooperation internationally, and of course this agenda that Colombia has from the state allowed us and facilitated us everything to send from Colombia police officers to all Latin America to train. At that moment we realized that we had a lot of things to transfer and also learn from the other police departments and experiences, and that made us create the network. This network was created in the year 2015. It was created here in Colombia. We had the first encounter here, and all the directors of police education of Latin America came. Most of the police institutions of Latin America are considered higher educations. All the institutions of Ecuador, Peru, Mexico, Central America have the police formation as a professional character. So in 2016, we start organizing the standards to give for the accreditation. We look all the topic of investigation and how we're going to transfer the curriculums, how we're going to start not unifying the formation of the police officers, because as I told you, each police officer is formed differently in each country, but it's how we could get to these study plans with high credit of quality in Colombia to see what works for them so they can implement them in each one of their countries as a best practice in topics of education. This year, it was done in Mexico. We see this topic of the accreditation without separating of the system of accreditation of our own countries, but we would work with some specific standards to see which are the basic standards that we all have in Latin America as police officers. This is how we're organized. The executive secretary is by Mexico. The first year was in Colombia, and we have links with all the countries of Latin America that are connected permanently. We usually have 2 meetings per year, one of directors, another one with the officials of the link that create the links. And in these meetings we have very important things to make measurements, what we have, what has been transferred, what we need, and how we start looking all these topics. And we have 2 points, a group of internationalization and another group that works in quality and standards. These are our members. We have 18 countries at the moment. 18 members. We aspire to have more members according to the last assembly that we had in Mexico this year. And in this moment we have 14 police departments. We have the Dominican Republic, El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, Mexico, Colombia, Brazil, Ecuador, Chile, Paraguay, Bolivia, Spain, the ECAIAD, that is a training element for anti-narcotics. We have the University Jaime Mendez of Puerto Rico, the University of Madrid of Spain, and the Science University of Mexico. And the focus is security. We're participating with them. We have some executive members that are the directors. We have some regulating members that are the ones that work directly with the exercise of doing all the transference, and the representative members that are the delegates with which we work to transfer this knowledge. In the last international event that was done in the first week in Mexico, the first week of the last year in Mexico, it was in charge of the Federal Police of Mexico. This was the 1st, the 2nd, and the 3rd of November, and we already raised the delegations. We're not 18 anymore. We are 58 delegations that are asking to participate in the network, because they're starting to observe that this practice allows to adjust them to standards, adjust to the mobility of professors, and the topic of research, how all this knowledge that is created helps to be applied in their security forces. This allows us to do an important topic, and we analyze strengths over what we have advanced. We are relatively new. We only have 3 years in this international network of educations, but we have new trends of higher education that we have all started looking, and what we want to do is that together all the police forces of Latin America can start advancing in these topics of higher education, doing it in a more dynamic way, adjusted to standards, making research, moving our professors, and above all, transferring our curriculums that will allow us to have police officers that are better formed. This year, the military police of Brazil asked for access. Italy, also the Italian Forum of Security, asked access. The University for the Peace of the United Nations in Costa Rica also asked to enter. Panama, with the protection system and security, also asked to enter. An agency of investigation also are asking for access to the network to talk about topics of criminal research, jurisdictional research, topics that we try to look and strengthen between all of us, topics about security, and the federal state police officers of Mexico, Chihuahua, Puebla, Tamaulipas, and the auxiliary police of Mexico City. All of them are looking for the formation of their police officers to align to international standards, and between ourselves be able to improve security topics. So which are the benefits? What does this allow us? What does this topic allow us to see? First instance is to make encounters and make it visible between all of us, between all the institutions of education, have an academic mobility with a double program, have a relationship with academical peers, researchers, to know each other, to have scientific, academical, and technological projects, associate the knowledge of the members of the network, make a diffusion of the community through permanent communication between all of us to see what we have. This topic of a double title is starting to be worked. We're working it strongly with those that have topics of divulging, to see if in this index indexation to show the world what we're doing in the world, topic of best practices and topics of protection, what we're doing with the formation. This topic of the libraries, being able to access the libraries of all the other higher education institutions of Latin America where they form police officers, what they have, academical programs that work, as I said, that allows us to have more integral programs, and to ensure the international quality of our police officer schools. This is the point where you can find us. The page is called RENEP if you want to access, just to know what RENET is about and how we're working. All our topic of internationalization. Thank you very much to all of you. Good day. And now I want to invite Jenny Bauer from the Catholic University of Chile in this 9th version of the Latin American and Caribbean Conference for the Internationalization of Higher Education, LACHEC 2017. Good morning. For me, it's great to be here, and I want to thank the occasion, and I want to congratulate the organization of this conference. It's the 2nd time I can share an experience of my university with you. The last year in Bogota, it was over the formation of transversal skills for PhD students. I want to present myself briefly. My name is Dutch. I am from Holland. from Dutchland, but I'm not from Chile, but I have lived for 25 years in Chile, and I am the director of everything that have to do with the formation of researchers at a PhD level in our university, and it's called School of PhD of Doctorate Programs, and it's a program that is within the vice principal of research that is coordinated with the faculties, all the topics that have to do with a PhD, to ensure quality and to see benefits and to create curricular topics. Just to give a context, I want to mention, for those that do not know the Pontificia Universidad Católica of Chile, we have, in terms of PhD, 35 programs in all the knowledges. 34 have been accredited, which means that they have a excellence quality, and there is one in an initial phase that is with that has to do with vegetable biotechnology, with 2 faculties of France. We have 1,200 students at the moment, and I always put the percentage because in Latin America, the percentage of students of PhDs are not quite high, as we know. And in our university, it doesn't achieve even the 4%. We would like to have more students for PhD levels, not only in Chile, but also from other countries. 27% of them are from other countries, and 83% of that 27% are from Latin America, mainly from Colombia and Venezuela. In this moment, we have 90 students from the PhD that come from Colombian University, and we're very happy with them because this intercultural environment at a Latin American level is very important to be able to share our experience. We almost have 1,589 PhD graduated, and we have 60 graduated and with double title. Most of them are from natural sciences, from engineers and technology, but we also have in arts and humanities and social science, and we also have interdisciplines and medical sciences, most of them. So here I just want to share this practice that is related with a topic that is quite pedagogical, and it's the topic of how to support those that are in a thesis phase to end within a reasonable time with a character of excellence and be able to present their own project. I had the opportunity of going to Great Britain, to England, to participate in a great project. I know you have budgets in Colombia from Newton and Great Britain, so I postulated, and with the University of Nottingham, that was very well received with the directors of the programs of PhD, by the students and the academical personnel, to learn from their practices in that university and see how they support the directors, the thesis directors, because they have a normativity that we usually didn't have. We only had in our university, our only emphasis was that the student had to have his director, he had to advance and hopefully produce a thesis in a reasonable period.
And so we had a set of concerns. For example, the total graduation rate as of 2019, between 2000 and 2019, only 64%, almost 65% graduated from these groups. The official rate in our country for 4 years, 8 semesters, is only 11.3%, and the graduation rate for official lengths, which was 25%, and average permanence was 5 years and a half. We usually obtained scholarships for 4 years. For the rest, they wouldn't graduate yet. There's a high level of desertion. 32%, 11 quit, 7 are eliminated, or the programs themselves indicate that they can no longer continue, and 14% is abandoning. A lot of this happens during the thesis phase. So we've tried to carry out specific actions to try to support the process of directing the thesis by professors. And so we've provided supervisor support. We've gone to these workshops. We've seen activities with other English entities. The University of Nottingham has a quality manual that was useful to us. This is a quick look through for those of you who know about PhDs. It's approximately the same in every country. There might be some differences in hours. This is where we see a red circle. All of the PhDs have an elective cycle of 1.5 years, and what's most important, and this is why there's emphasis on, and what I want to share with you is the research cycle. Everyone who's carried out their thesis, we all, including myself, we know that the last part is complex. And so this research cycle lasts longer, maybe 3/4 of it, or maybe the courses. And so in university we have a very important aspect, which is ensuring the internationalization of training of researchers, and so it is mandatory to carry out a thesis with an international component, and carry out an exchange abroad and dominating the English language, and so there are some transversal activities that ensure this. Now, what is the goal of our experience, our practice in terms of thesis supervision? This is with the professors to share good practices and tools to facilitate and accelerate the direction of these theses in order to finish within the time required by the students, generate instruments to value and recognize the effort. And so usually what's most important is to dictate undergraduate courses to large groups and not mentorship or tutoring, which is usually one-to-one. So we want to have instruments to value and recognize. And if we direct the thesis for a PhD student, this should be valued. Some rewards could be maybe the best thesis director or supervisor in order to optimize the process of preparing, publishing, and providing visibility to these theses. It shouldn't be left between a professor and a student. This should be published and shared with the general public through effective communication, both in English and Spanish. Activities and impact of our program that I'd like to share with you. At the end, I'm going to show you some documents. And so, excellence of this, it's very important that our universities are of excellence. We don't want our students to go to the Northern Hemisphere to obtain their PhD. We want a lot of them to stay within our country, to practice outside or do some postdocs, but strengthen our capabilities as universities to train PhDs, to educate them. And so what's most important among these activities, I won't go into too much detail because you can go visit all of these things, is the scientific productivity of students and professors, improve them, the graduation rates, the visibility, and the collaboration networks. And so there are several activities on good practices, sharing and developing lessons, and having an institutional framework. This means when a student comes in that they have almost a contract with the rights and responsibilities of a professor. They can be, maybe they can have at least 10 meetings per year, and you don't have to chase them around. There should be clear norms, instruments to recognize and value that work. And so here, VRA, Academic Vice Rector's Office, and where I work on research, we have to work together. And important tools for the support in terms of writing the thesis. English UC, that is a faculty in our university, and a set of courses for transversal skills. We've carried out several activities. We've gone to the University of Nottingham. We've studied models and best practices. We've carried out the thesis supervision program that I can share with you if you're interested, and a pilot workshop on good practices that we've carried out. Still pending. When I sent this presentation was before November, and so we've already carried out a talk on good practices with Dr. Gardner from the University of Maine. Right now we are with an academic committee, different faculties. We're validating the current policies, and this month we have the first version of the workshop for writing a thesis in English, because the feedback on structure is very important. It's important for the students to write well. Activities for 2018, we have to continue with our work. It's still not done. We have a survey for the evaluation of students. The thesis period, we have different periods, and there are focuses on process and early phases where we are currently in process, and at the end we have the product itself. And so there was a survey with very interesting results that I don't have time to share with you, but it is obviously very important to know the opinion of students. Our students are very happy with the quality of education, but not with the accompaniment of their professors. They have top professors, they have publications, different projects, but they don't have the time usually, or they don't have the tools to direct the thesis work. And so we're going to continue with the workshops, and we want to have a space for collaborations, workshops and services so that the students can share their experiences. And for the first time we're going to give an award for excellence, not to the best thesis as we usually do, but to excellence in the supervision, to reward a professor in December when 150 new PhDs will graduate. The idea is to deliver that award. This is to conclude. We have that support to the supervision of thesis work. I have some examples here. Here it's the same thing that I can share with all of you. And in order to finish on time, you can find us on the website. And I'll leave this invitation as Universidad Católica will be able to invite all of you from other universities to carry out a workshop here in Colombia about this very subject, on sharing best practices. Thank you. Now, we invite Ángela Ríos from the Universidad Surcolombiana to conclude with this presentation on best practices in the 9th edition of the Latin American and Caribbean Conference for the Internationalization of Higher Education, LACHEC 2017. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. Good morning to everyone. I'm Ángela Ríos. I come from the Surcolombiana University, Director of Research and Social Outreach of that university, Neiva, Huila, Colombia. And then on the following 29th of November, we will receive high quality accreditation. I'd like you to know that the factor, and I want to publicly recognize and thank my colleague, Gloria Cotrino, because from the unit of internationalization and our Orni, she provided very significant support to all of this, especially because in the measurement of performance in Colombia, we rose 20 positions in internationalization. This means that we are doing the right thing despite all of the challenges we face. We've had a long life as a university. We have 3 of our own PhDs, recently with quality registration. There's a great challenge in the region in terms of educating researchers, professors and professionals, and exporting them and having them respond to the needs of our context. That is very important to us. I thank LACHEC 2017, its organizers. It's been a marvelous event and a very great opportunity for us to show some of our practices, our good practices in terms of internationalization. I'm going to talk to you about how one of our networks arises, which, and in addition to being the vice rector, I'm one of the leaders of the groups, and with great honor, I'd like to say it's one of the most important groups in the Universidad Surcolombiana, which is the neurosciences group of the university. It's category A1 in Colciencias, thanks to all of that support that we've received from many people, and especially the constant teamwork that we've been able to structure through a meta model, which is neuroscience, which can be transversal to many activities of our universities, such as neuroeducation, neuropsychology, and there are so many areas of knowledge that are fed from that model. And so I'm going to present to you this good practice that we've been consolidating for 12 years, and thanks to a very important person who came to our university, because these good practices are done emotionally as well. Emotional connections are important when it comes to generating collaboration strategies. We've seen it this way, and we've understood it in this, which is one of our good practices, a network which has been constructed throughout these 12 years. Here at Watt University is one of our strategic allies, and it's been working with us for 12 years. As I mentioned, we have one of its members here, Dr. Mario Parra, who is one of the people who has been working with us since 2002. He leads at Harriet University the Center for Life Sciences. This researcher, Dr. Mario Parra, has been working with us. He is very close to us because he arrived at Neiva around 15 years ago. He married a woman from Huila, and right now he lives in the UK, Edinburgh, and from there he supports us with this entire process. There are areas of knowledge that we've been consolidating throughout these years, articulating our processes. We have research such as work on Alzheimer's, behavioral difficulties, and neurodevelopment. And I'd like to talk to you about something important that we tend to see as a barrier. We haven't traveled much to Edinburgh, and they haven't come to Colombia much. We work almost primarily through the internet. These kinds of meetings are very important to us. We have doubled our bandwidth in order to improve the connectivity so that we can dialogue within those communities and have a scenario in which we can share knowledge without having to travel so much. But still, we have to thank ICETEX, because ICETEX on many occasions throughout these years have brought and financed national and international events regarding these illnesses that we study. Thanks to this collaboration, we have books. They're in the book citation in the index. In addition to this, we have collaborative thesis work. Right now we are exploring what we call co-lawsuits, something that's quite difficult for us. Is for our researchers to be co-tutors of PhD thesis. And so we began working with undergraduate work, which is quite important to us, because all of this undergraduate work, although they are small experiments and trials, beginnings in the research of our students, we can generate scientific articles through this. Everything we do has to generate scientific articles that will be published in high invisibility publications, because this won't allow us the status that we need to have as a network. And so despite these being our undergraduate students who are leading these theses and all of this work, we give it the level that it requires. That work takes on significant relevance and feeds our research. It allows us to visualize all of this in important platforms. And so right now we have co-tutorships in PhD thesis with the support of Edinburgh University. Here we have some other collaborative work. These are scientific articles. We have around 24 scientific articles that we've produced in collaboration. We have all of the articles here. Some of them, there's a very important one, which I think is interesting for us to look through, which is the subject of neuropsychological analysis through P300 and the voc-out potentials. We recently set up the neurocognition laboratory, which arises due to the need of generating technology and research strategies with advanced technology in order to join a network of laboratories in neurophysiology. Right now, the university can do this because we recently inaugurated the lab thanks to the money that we've obtained through national funds, which allow us to cooperate with these Colciencias funds through projects that have been approved throughout 9 years. We've always had projects approved by Colciencias for 300 or 400 million per year. This allows us to remain active in terms of research, and this is why we obtained this equipment, and we have the lab now. And so through the web, we can now connect at our lab with the neurophysiology research network from Edinburgh and carry out experiments via the web. We can do that, and now we can collaborate more. Events we've carried out. We focus on continuous education. Without education within our research, we would just be in Neiva and Huila in that scenario, and we wouldn't have the possibility to make ourselves visible within this community. It's a critical mass that's important to the world, and it's become more significant because neurosciences are a model that seek to respond to many of the concerns we have regarding human behavior and the illnesses and pathologies that can arise within our cognitive structures and the architecture of our brains. Here we have the structure of our events. Every month, on the first Tuesday of each month, we have our Memory Tuesday. For the last one, we've had the presence of Dr. Mario Parra as a speaker. We bring him quite frequently so that he can serve as a constant connection and keep the network active. We also have events of all kind involving not just undergraduate students but postgraduate as well. The recently approved PhD in health sciences, we have it as one of our strengths. I am part of the team of the PhD in health sciences, and with Dr. Mario Parra, we serve as tutors for one of the projects of the PhD thesis, which speak of how we are progressing on the comprehension of Alzheimer's disease and early biomarkers. Right now, thanks to the work we're doing with Dr. Parra, Dr. Francisco Lopera of the University of Antioquia has asked that we participate with him in some work he's doing in collaboration with the United States. He has significant financial resources in terms of finding a cure for Alzheimer's, and he has requested 250 of our patients that we have processed DNA for in order to include that sample within the 5,000 patients that he works with in his project, financed with international resources. And so right now, we come in as a university from Huila, as a university of the south, as a small university, and we seek to contribute to that research on Alzheimer's. It's very important to us because thanks to these contacts that we've been able to establish with the support of the University of Edinburgh, we have the possibility to participate in that collaboration network. Here we have what we do continuously. There's constant training for teachers, the use of new technological tools for neurophysiological measurement. We have undergraduate students and workshops working on all of the paradigms of neurophysiology, so that we don't have to come up short when it comes to developing our research projects. We have to generate critical mass at our universities, and we can do this thanks to sharing research experiences with Edinburgh University. We have Dr. Mario Parra at Edinburgh, and we are here through the screen observing and analyzing different potentials from the University of Edinburgh. We always receive them, and they visit Sur Colombiana and our internal media. Current collaboration projects. I was told 10 minutes, and I'm very strict with that time. Here we have something very important. We began to explore, since it's a meta-model, neuroscience, we began to work on the analysis of homicides in our prisons in Neiva and Rivera Huila. We have 240 cases of a homicide. This is to say that there's a psychopathological profile that we have to analyze, because over 2 cruel murders represent the presence of a profile. And so we are evaluating that prison population with an AP300 and potentials that arise in those homicides. And the 250 patients that Dr. Lopera included in his study, we are also evaluating with evoked potentials and the P300 in order to contribute to the analysis of biomarkers for that illness. Here we have this, which has just been financed. We have 600 million pesos for the next 3 years in this program for cognitive development directed to the emotional component and the behavioral component of children who are victims of conflict. As a region, we are a receptive region for highly vulnerable populations. In fact, the Sur Colombiana University has an indigenous reserve. We are multicultural and diverse, and so we have to take all of this into account in our processes. And so we have this project approved. In addition, we have applied to the Newton Caldas. At this point, in the Newton Fund, we are doing well with the process. We have hope that our project will be financed, and we have the possibility next year. We've scheduled the visit from 3 of our students who will visit Edinburgh University with resources from our projects. Because as a public university, we need to obtain resources in order to sustain our research and give it the quality that it requires and the level that it requires. I thank you for such an important space in which to share with you and speak of our university, our Huila. We have the desert of the Tatacoa. We have an archaeological park in St. Augustine. And so I write this here because I couldn't modify the slides very much. And so I'd just like to thank you again within the units of internationalization of our universities, who are all very important. Personally, I value the work they do and the effort which sometimes isn't well recognized. This makes the people who work with this are so important. So thank you again, and an applause. Thank you for having me here and allowing me to share with you our significant experience on good practices from a distance, because we haven't traveled very much. And I'd finally like to say the following. This is incredible, but for now we don't have agreement with the Edinburgh University. Why? Because we think that, as you have stated, we need their good practices, that the relationship can mature, so that there can be a true collaboration, an effective one, and one which will allow the universities to grow and not do the work of others, but to grow hand in hand the way that we should as universities. Thank you, and let's continue enjoying our LACHEC.
Let's begin with the questions that we have here in the room, so we can continue with the questions that are being done online through our live transmission. Okay, good afternoon. For the doctor that spoke about the PhDs in the Catholic University of Chile, I wanted to ask if you have any kind of alliance with any university in Colombia, and if you offer PhD scholarships or something. Thank you very much for your question. Yes, we do have several agreements with universities in Colombia. I have them written down. It's like 18 different agreements. And we have intentions of signing an agreement for a double titulation with the Catholic University, and with some of the university. In one university of Antioquia, we have another meeting. We've had meeting with the National University of Colombia and with other universities. We are very interested in promoting co-directions and guidance and thesis, because the idea is having projects of investigation together when we have students of PhD from both universities. So that's the idea, to have like this South-South alliance, not only from the south to the north, but also south-south. Any other question? No. Okay, so through our live transmission for Carlos Montufar, do you have documented any methodology over the best practices that would allow the management of knowledge for the interested parts? Yes, definitely. Due to the accreditation processes, we have made a lot of efforts. We have had to document all the processes that we have. We have them. They are open they're open in our webpage to be obtained by any person that is interested. And not only that, but through our Interchange program, we have students that can go from Ecuador to the United States. And we have like a number that we need. So and usually they are not fulfilled, so we still have spaces for other students. If you're interested, that's something that you can come to our university and we will help you to internationalize. And the question to Peter, do you have documented any methodology over the best practices that allow the knowledge management for the interested networks or for the interested parts?
We've now taken our partnerships to a new level where the partners are actually regarded as a family, and now getting involved in social issues as well as academic issues, as well as we've been able to extend our network into African countries via other networks, particularly looking at business in alliance with the actual city administration, with the actual university.
Ok.
Okay,
¿Alguien más?
great.
¿Alguna
Any
otra
other
pregunta
question
que
you can
tengan
have?
por allí?
Buenas tardes para el señor Jorge Patiño.
Good afternoon for Mr. Jorge
Vi que
Patiño.
existe mucha articulación
I
con
saw that
escuelas
you made
de
a lot of
otros países,
articulation
con
with
escuelas de
schools of
policía.
other
¿Cómo
countries,
está la
but
articulación con
police,
las universidades nuestras?
police schools. How is the articulation with our
Bueno,
universities?
la red está abierta para todas las instituciones
Well, the
de educación
network
superior
is
que quieran
open for
participar.
all the
El
institutions
tema
of
es
higher
el foco
education that want to participate.
de la red.
The
¿A qué
topic
estamos
is
dirigidos?
the
A temas de
focus of the
seguridad,
network.
información
What are we
de
directed to? We are
policías.
directed
Eso
to
significa que si
security
hay
and
un
information
programa,
of
como el caso que
police
tenemos con la
officers. So
Universidad de
that means
Nebrija,
if we have a
en temas
program
de
like the
seguridad,
case that we have with the
pues
University
que
of
nos sirve a
Nebrija
nosotros
that
para el
has to do with
intercambio
topics of
de
security,
información, para el
that
intercambio
will help us
académico,
to do
pues
interchange of
pueden participar en
information,
las mismas.
academical
Depende
interchange.
del enfoque
Well,
que tenga
you
el
can
programa, los que
participate. It
vayan
depends on
a
the
hacer, o
focus
los
that the
temas de
program
investigación
has,
que tengan las universidades.
or the
Pero la red
research
está abierta
topics
para
that the
todos.
universities can have. But the network is open for everyone.
¿Alguna pregunta más?
Any other question?
Bien, a todos nuestros ponentes,
Very
gracias
well.
por
To
acompañarnos en
all
esta
of our
ponencia
speakers,
de
thank you
Buenas
for
Prácticas.
being
Es un honor
with us in
tenerlos
this
en esta
speech over
LACHEC
best practices.
2017
It's an
en
honor to
Medellín,
have you
ciudad
here in
elegida para
LACHEC
esta Conferencia
2017 in
Latinoamericana y del
Medellín, the
Caribe
city that
para la
was elected for
internacionalización
this
de la
conference for
educación
Latin America and
superior.
Caribbean
Muchas
for the
gracias a todos ustedes
internationalization of
por
the higher
acompañarnos
education.
esta mañana.
Thank you
El
very
aplauso
much for
para
being
nuestros
with us in this
ponentes, por
morning.
supuesto.
The applause.